Most as a homeowner, the first question should be, if you haven't already discovered it, it's contractor license.
Okay.
We are never allowed to touch somebody's home and do anything, material and labor total, that comes over $600 without a license. Almost every single trade out there is held to that regard, short of masonry and drywall. Pretty much everybody
Mm.
else is required.
Hi, and welcome to the Home Service Hookup podcast. I'm Jonathan, and today I am really thrilled to be talking to Tony from Preferred Roofing in Traverse City, Michigan. Tony has built an amazing roofing business and just does an incredible job serving their customers. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to chat with Tony today, learn more about his story, what got him into roofing, and maybe learn some roofing tips along the way. Tony, with that, would you give us an elevator pitch introduction to yourself as maybe how you got in the business and how we got here today?
Yeah, really, this is as sad as it sounds. This is all I've ever done professionally. I've only ever roofed, and as a child, when I helped my family do stuff, it was either roofing or siding. 30 years of doing it now.
I think that's pretty cool, actually. That's really what you spent your life doing. Obviously, it it makes you want to, in my mind, just that premier expert. Then, if that's what you've been doing, you know that far better than anybody else because it's what your experience is in. Tell me a little bit about growing up, and it sounds like maybe you grew up in a family of contractors and stuff like that. Is that accurate, or tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it wasn't my dad, but my uncle had a roofing company, roofing and siding when I was young. He's far retired and gone out of it now.
Sure.
And my grandfather had a roofing and siding company, and then they worked together and helped each other out. And in the summer times and stuff, when they needed help, I
Oh,
wasn't the brains of the operation. Obviously, I was the back. At a very young age, was learning work ethic and doing things right the first time, so we don't have to come back. So, yeah.
that's important. I grew up in a farming community, and my youngest is now 15. And in fact, we were just having a conversation that I said, I think the best job you could get this summer is either working on a roof or helping one of the dairy farmers put hay up. I
Yeah.
said, both of those, you will never, ever think that you've had to work hard again after you've done those
Yeah.
two jobs. No,
Yeah.
very
It's
interesting.
it's an honest way to earn a living, that's for sure. Yeah, earn your
Absolutely.
money.
What happened in your life, Tony, to cause you to say, hey, that's a direction I want to take. I want to follow in my grandfather and uncle's footsteps and head that way. What caused you to take that direction?
Honestly, none of my background had anything to do with it. When I got done with high school, I wasn't the type of person that felt like college was where I wanted to be,
I can appreciate that.
and an office wasn't the environment for me. I knew I was born knowing I had to work hard and felt like I needed to get in the trades and, get to work. So that was what I knew. And an opportunity came up. And like I say, it just jumped right in. That it was never an intention of necessarily even being a lifelong thing. I just hired in and stayed with them and then eventually started this company.
Kudos for obviously the work you've done, the growth that's happened along the way. That's quite a testament to your just innate talents to pull everything together and do that. It reminds me, as you mentioned, being in high school and kind of deciding that the trades was where you want to go. While I hadn't planned to ask, talk to me a little bit about the current state of careers and all that. I hear a lot, and I hear a lot from the home service companies we work with and professionals that, one of the things that's so missing often is that the high schools aren't necessarily promoting the trades. Now, I think that started to change maybe in the last couple of years as there's been some shortages, but what have you seen as a professional in the industry, Tony, as far as that acceptance that, hey, maybe college isn't where everybody needs to go because there's some great opportunities in the trades to demonstrate your skill, your craftsmanship, and to make good money as well.
Yeah. Well, simple fact of the matter is, not everybody can be a lawyer and not everybody can be a doctor, and
Yep,
a college education doesn't always lead to a bunch of money.
very true.
You can graduate high school, have already done a couple years of apprenticing welding, graduate, start working at a place as a welder and make more than a lot of school teachers start out after a 4-year degree. and or numerous other college educated jobs. And like I say, the world needs ditch diggers. Somebody's got to build your car. Somebody's got to build your house, and it's an admirable trade. And at the end of the day, some of the happiest people are people that go home dirty and sweaty and stink.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a very rewarding because again, you're using a skill that you've got and a skill that you've honed to really add tremendous value.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting to hear. And I like hearing that. It's interesting. I just had a recent conversation with somebody about exactly what you mentioned. They were looking at going to college, and in their case, they're into diesel mechanics and things like that. They love that. They love working with diesel engines. It happens to be something they've got into in high school. And part of the conversation was just what you said. It was, hey, you can go to college and you can rack up a bunch of debt, but if you love what you're doing, why not go work for a company, spend those 4 years learning and becoming an expert at it? And he came back and actually his dad did, and we were chatting a little bit. And he's going to be making over 100 grand a year in probably the next 24 months,
Yep.
just out of high school by 2 years.
Yep.
And he's going to get paid for the next 2 years to learn all that stuff. So 4 years down the road, he's a few multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead with no debt,
With no doubt.
a great career that pays him well, that has a lot of flexibility in his case, because it really fits with who he is and what he wants to do, and it's his passion.
And he
I
goes home
think that
happy at
it's
night.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's gonna go home happy at night. I think that nails it. And what a better position to put some young person in at that point to have money in their pocket as opposed to a few $100,000 in debt and not sure what they want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly. Or find out that there really isn't a job available for you. So many
absolutely.
people that have done that. There's not the demand, technology or whatever happens and the world changes. And,
Oh
here's
yeah.
that degree that's a coaster.
Yeah. No, and I think that happens way too often. So
And,
no, I appreciate you sharing that. Let's go into roofing just a little bit because I wanted to, while a lot of the people that watch our podcast are in the home services industry, we also have a lot of people that watch that are looking for some of the services that our guests offer. Talk to me a little bit about some of the more common roofing issues that homeowners face and what types of things that they may want to do to address those and maybe address when's the right time to call a professional like yourselves and get somebody like Preferred Roofing involved, as opposed to when do they not need to do that, something like that.
yeah, good question. Really, there's a few telltale signs. Obviously, if you're seeing any signs of moisture inside the home, that's a big indicator that it's time to get somebody out there. But another big one that a lot of people miss is granule loss. Your gutters are starting to fill up, your downspouts are spilling out. That means everything's drying out up there as far as the asphalt's concerned, and it can't retain the granules anymore. If it can't retain the granules, it can't hold itself down. And the tar strips that seal them are drying with the shingle. So you're just one big storm away from having problems. Other issues would be noticeably deteriorated spots that look different, that could be caused by ventilation issues or various other things. Always good things to look for.
Absolutely. I assume the best bet at that point is to reach out to somebody like Preferred Roofing and say, "Hey, I've noticed some things. I need you to come take a look and tell me what's going on. Is it something I need to worry about or not?" Is that something that you and your crews do as part of that process? Is begin with an evaluation and kind of what's the next steps? Or talk to me as a homeowner reaches out to you. What can they expect for a professional roofer that's going to come and look at their roof, whether they're in Michigan here or whether maybe they're in Alabama? What might they expect from a professional?
One thing that you're going to be looking for is somebody that's willing to get up there, take a look at the flashings, look at the chimneys, see what's going on. Maybe a willingness to peek in the attic to make sure ventilation, because that's a big factor. We're finding that most structures, the way they're built, the way guys ventilate them, insulate them, various things, corners cut, whatever it might be, even somewhat modern homes, they're just not venting. And a lack of ventilation can cause a roof that should last 25 to fail in 15. So
Wow.
the money you spend on a roof, it's really important that the flashings are correct, ventilation's correct, everything's done in a fashion so that you get the maximum lifespan out of the product.
With the ventilation issues and things like that, something admittedly Tony had not really thought of. Is that something that you guys can help resolve if you find there's a problem, or is
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
okay, good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So even that much more important than to get a pro on the roof and in the attic looking around, identifying what's there so that you can get that value because obviously if you can get another 10 years of value out of that roof or life out of that roof, that provides tremendous value to you as a homeowner.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Losing 10 years, that's the difference between buying 2 roofs and 3 roofs in your lifetime. So,
oh, absolutely.
yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about new roof and installing new roofs and stuff like that. Obviously, I know roofs last different lengths of time depending on a lot of different variables. And this may be a dumb question, but I'm not a roofer. As you look at that, talk to me about how do you as a pro determine whether you put another layer of shingles on top? I don't know. I know that has a name and I forget what it is, or whether we do a complete tear off and start back at the plywood. How do you determine that when you look at a roof as to what's the best way to fix or improve or replace that roof?
Our approach actually never includes a roof over. Um,
Okay.
although building code in some sections does state that it's legal and allowed, other sections of building code, which would be referencing ice and water shield,
Yep.
completely eliminate the option of doing a roof over.
Okay.
Ice and water shield is required on your eaves and valleys and penetrations per code, and that product has to be applied to the plywood only. It can't be applied to any other surface or it don't work. It has to be the hard surface that the nail's going in. So therefore, to do a roof right and to be able to warrant it and to meet building code, pass inspection and everything, we have to do a full tear off every time. All new ice and water on the flashing points and new chimney flashings. Everything, from our standpoint, if we're doing a roof, is going to get replaced.
So that would, am I correct then in assuming that my neighbor who a couple of years ago got what I would consider a new roof, but it was a roof over. The crews came, they took off patches here and there, but for the most part, it was just putting down new shingles over old shingles. That's not necessarily what should be happening in order to maintain that home and maintain that roof properly. Is that a
Yeah,
correct assumption?
that is correct. Again, you can't properly use the ice and water shield. And with a roof over, you wouldn't. And really nobody does. Uh,
Sure.
that's what makes it so that you're not meeting code. But there's a lot of factors involved. From the word go, it was never a good idea. When you're putting a nail into a shingle, if that shingle's sitting on a hard surface, that nail hits the shingle and seats and holds the shingle down. If that shingle's sitting on a soft surface, that nail can flex the shingle, and then the
Uh-huh.
nail stops going, the shingle comes back, but the nail stays in place. That's what's called a blow through.
Oh,
Incredibly common thing with roof overs. I've seen them in as little as 7 years. Big sheets of the roof just start sliding off. The shingles are stuck together, but they're not nailed down. So they're sliding off the home. Anybody that's done this any period of time has probably seen that from a roof over.
so talk to me from a homeowner's perspective, Tony. How, not being a roofing expert, how do I know that I'm getting the best advice? Are there things I can ask a roofer like preferred if you're coming out to my house that can help tell me as a homeowner I'm going to get the pro preferred versus the traveling roofing crew that's going to, I don't want to say splash and dash because that's not what we're doing, but basically do the cheapest job possible and be on the road. What questions as a homeowner should we be asking of our roofing contractors to make sure we're getting the recommendations that you're recommending and getting that good service?
Obviously, first and foremost, as a homeowner, the first question should be, if you haven't already discovered it, it's contractor license.
Okay.
We are never allowed to touch somebody's home and do anything, material and labor total, that comes over $600 without a license. Almost every single trade out there is held to that regard, short of masonry and drywall. Pretty much everybody
Mm.
else is required. That being said, above and beyond, insurance is always a number one factor. You don't want somebody up on your roof, you know, that their wife's going to own your home after he falls. That's never a good situation either. From there, my standpoint is just asking basic general questions about flashings and the product and process. How do you do your valleys? How do you do your chimneys? Am I getting new flashings? With questions like that, you should be able to weed out pretty quickly who's doing a complete job and then who's just coming in and, you
Yeah,
know,
you're doing the minimum necessary.
just doing the bare minimum and not really giving you what you want.
Sure.
W
You
Everything in
mentioned
your home is dependent upon your roof doing its job properly. So, really at the end of the day, it's the last part of the home that you should be looking for the cheapest price. It really is. It's the most important part of the home. Your floors mean nothing if they're wet.
no, that's a very good point. Very good point. You talked a little bit about insurance and safety and things like that. I'm getting a little too old to get on a roof myself, in my opinion, and certainly in my wife's opinion, which is all just fine with me. But talk to me about some of the considerations that, as a homeowner, I should be thinking about as I've got a roofing crew coming out. Is that the safety aspect? Can I leave that to the crews to inform me of things I need, or are there things as a homeowner that I should be paying attention to pertaining to that?
As far as safety for the homeowner's concerned, that should be the contractor as far as making sure doorways, everything's protected. The homeowner knows that they got to have their car out and things like that. And really that all that stuff boils down to the contractor and the guy that's ordering and scheduling the job and everything. Make sure that
Sure.
that's all really covered. Just as far as safety of the guys on the job and stuff, I don't really know where that would pertain to a homeowner standpoint. Just
Fair enough.
I don't really know what's required of OSHA or anything like. We put in our bids that all jobs are going to be set up for OSHA specifications and guidelines, so people know that we plan to do that. But at the end of the day, do they know if that harness is legal or this or that?
Sure.
So just
All the more
requiring
reason to, yeah,
protocols be taken.
I would say all the more reason to hire a professional as opposed to trying to cut corners again, as we've been talking about all through the interview here. That makes sense. So talk to me a little bit about technology. Every part of the building that we talk about or that we learn about seems to have technology fitting into it nowadays. Talk to me about what's happening in the roofing industry as far as utilization of either new materials or new technologies, new standards that might be of interest to homeowners as they're looking at roofing options and things that maybe they might want to be aware of.
Yeah. So there's a couple interesting things as far as that goes. From a salesman standpoint, we have software that now measures the roof. It's been available for a few years now. It's not new, but that makes it somebody going out to measure the roof maybe could be somebody that's not capable of climbing up there, but can get the measurement done and can get several of them done in a day, as opposed to field measuring where you might be able to do 3 houses. These guys can go, pull in, take some pictures, and the satellites have already measured the home.
Oh, wow.
We just got to show up and get all the details. Uh,
Okay.
so that's really helpful. But really, from a customer standpoint, I think one of the most exciting things out there in roofing really is the SBS technology in shingles, which is basically making the shingles rubberized instead of brittle like most are. Uh,
Okay.
Makes them impact resistant so that they can handle a lot more hail. Not a big thing here in Michigan where we're at, but in Oklahoma and things like that, they're actually becoming required now.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
which around here, almost nothing that's going on is impact resistant. We've got of about 50 jobs on the books. We got 2 or 3 right now because there's not a great push for it. But if you look at it like we get one good hailstorm every 10 years, if you're doing your roof this year, it's going to see one of those big hailstorms.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
something to take into account. Do you want to roof your roof in 10 years when it's done? Even if the insurance covers parts of it, you're going to pay for it in the long run, plus
Absolutely.
the disturbance to the family and the home and the lawn and everything else that takes place. Just in the most cases, it's not a whole lot more money for a shingle that has a new technology that's a dramatic improvement where, the rest of the shingles we're installing, that technology was invented in the 1880s. And it hasn't gone anywhere since. It's a pretty dramatic leap forward in shingle technology. And it'd be nice to see it being more heavily utilized all across the country so that we're not throwing these things away every 5 to 7 years in the hail and tornado areas.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Again, it seems like a small investment to make to get a tremendous amount of value for what you're getting there. I know you're up in Traverse City, Tony, and you cover a lot of areas around the whole Traverse City Bay Area. Talk to me a little bit about considerations in your area that you need to be thinking about from a roofing perspective. Obviously, there's things like snow loads and all that, and I know some of that has to do with the way the house is just constructed based on the slope of the roof and that. But what other considerations do you, as a roofing company, look at maybe in Traverse City in that area as opposed to, again, Oklahoma or other areas of the country?
Yeah. Actually, our biggest one here would somewhat relate to those areas. Uh, a large percentage of the homes we do are lakeshore homes.
Uh
So
huh.
they're somewhere on Lake Michigan. And a 3-story house sitting on the bluff experiences pretty heavy winds when here a few miles inland. It's not a big deal, but if at the airport they record 60-mile-an-hour winds, that roof might be seeing 80. Proper installation, a heavier shingle, anything along the lakeshore. That's the first thing we do is try to educate them on upgrading the shingle a little bit so that it can withstand the winds. And
I was gonna say, does that change the fastening technology you use? Is it a different product that you're using then for that wind resistance,
it's
or
a
what?
heavier shingle. They're always required to be storm nailed, so it'd be a minimum of 6 nails when you're on the lakeshore. And then we always like to put on a heavier quality product. You're offering somebody 3 shingle lines, and the bottom one being your good and then best better.
Sure,
We'll just take the good out of the equation and say, you really need to look at the the better or
the better
best,
or the best, yeah.
or we're not gonna get what we want out of the roofing job.
This next question may not be a good fit at all, but I was just down in Alabama and enjoying the Gulf Coast not too long ago and talking to some people, and I learned that down there, because of the hurricanes, they actually have different certifications to some of the roofs that they have as to how many miles per hour winds they can put up with. Do we have anything like that at all in Michigan, or are there things like that in the industry that, again, let's say I've got a house along the lake shore or on the water and I'm worried about that. Are there different certifications like that that are standardized that we have here in Michigan, or is that unrelated?
No, it's not. To some extent, I don't think it would be a bad idea to have it be a requirement in certain areas, but no. Oklahoma, where you're talking about, those areas will require you to add screws to the roof sheeting, not
Okay.
just nails that it have. And then they require you to tape in the seams on the plywood. So if a tornado rips the roof off, at least some of the water sheds the building. And those would be like the Guardian and things like that that you're talking about, those extra levels of certification. But we don't really experience the wind events here where half your roof blows off. So that's why none of that stuff really is in play here. But no,
I appreciate it. It was something I'd never heard of, having grown up and lived in West Michigan most of my life. I'm like, wow, I never thought of some of these things that they were mentioning, some things you just even mentioned that, again, you never, because it's not something we run into.
yeah,
Maybe we'll see a roof that caves in because of too much snow load, but yeah, there's the roofs that shingles come off because, again, they've gotten too old, or like you said, they've just lost their ability to withstand. But I've never really thought of some of those other things because we don't, thankfully, don't run into those. And I'm, yes, I'm thankful for that.
yeah,
That, that's pretty cool. So talk to me a little bit about your service here. Let's talk a little bit about preferred so that people can learn a little bit more about you guys, Tony. Talk to me about the areas that you serve and which customers you really provide the most value to in your area, Tony.
yeah. So we have 2 locations, one in Traverse City and one in Charlevoix. And between the two, we're basically going from Benzie County all the way to the bridge, following the lake shore. We don't cross the state over to Alpena or anything like that.
Okay.
So Traverse City over to Gaylor, I-75-ish, all the way straight up to the bridge. We cover that whole region between the 2 locations. And we're a residential and commercial roofing contractor, primarily doing shingles and then membrane flat roofs.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of commercial roofing as well. It's not our biggest portion, but nursing homes, schools, things like that, doing commercial flat roofing. And then a very little bit of cedar shake we do as well, and do a little bit of metal, but those are 2 really specialized items. We try not to do them in volume because the ones that we do, we really want them to be showpieces and
Sure.
be something we can put our name on and be proud of. So we don't try to really slam and bang any of that stuff in any way. Just have just the right crew and the right guys. And
Excellent. You mentioned a little bit about commercial roofing, and we haven't really talked much about that. I know growing up, my parents were in business and they owned a building in the downtown area where I grew up, and it was a flat roof or largely a flat roof. It may have had some slight slope to it, but I know they were always struggling with water penetration and leak issues and things like
Mhm.
that. Um, you mentioned shingles on homes haven't changed much. Has from a commercial roofing perspective, have the flat roof coatings and the way that we handle flat roofs, has that evolved much over the years, or are there some new things happening there?
It has evolved a lot. Back in the day, everything was asphalt based, whether it was a hot tar or a torch down, and you had smooth and gravel coated and different, but some sort of asphalt product
Yep.
that was made very similar to a shingle, but the process was heated on the roof and put on rather than in a factory and put into
Hmm.
pieces. But basically, it had fiberglass in it. The whole shot was all real similar in process, and it was real susceptible to sunlight, drying and cracking. And that's why what they would have had constant issues is as those roofs just started getting a little old, it became real problematic. Nowadays, membrane roof is whether it be EPDM, TPO, or PVC, the membranes have really taken over. They hold up to the sunlight better. They're more flexible with the expansion and contraction that structures go through. And then another important thing that's come into play is building codes finally started to require some legitimate insulation on a commercial building so that we can be
Okay.
efficient. To me, that's exciting. It's good for everything. It's good for the roof, contractor, good for the building, and good for the
Absolutely.
environment. So,
Now with those membranes then, I actually remember as a kid, now I'm in my mid-50s, so this was, certainly close to probably 45, 50 years ago, but I remember getting up on the top of their retail building, and it was, I don't know, probably 15, 20 feet up in the air, but I remember, yeah, it literally was like one big shingle. They would put tar up, and then they would put stone or something on top of that tar, and with the membranes, do those just literally essentially lay on top of the roof then and get seamed together and provide a much more impervious structure to get through? Is that how that works? Or
yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happens. It comes in a rolled product that gets rolled out, and either the seams are glued or heat welded. The better ones are heat welded, and
Mhm.
then they're either glued down or mechanically fastened. There's a few approaches where they would lay drain stone on the membrane to keep it on,
Okay,
which has its pros and cons. Somebody's got to take that off eventually. So consider,
sure.
but yeah, they're a much more monolithic seal. And with a quality membrane product, the idea that you're looking for is that it's maintenance free for its life. With most of
Okay,
the asphalt products, you had to come in 5 years and coat it, and then 10 years, and then 15. And if you didn't do these things, you had a lot of problems. And most of the guys selling them didn't tell you that you had to do that because nobody wants to buy a roof.
yeah, that's not how you make a good
You got
sale up front. Yeah.
to start spending money on this day one to keep it alive. So they didn't advertise that fact. So nobody did it, and they had a lot of problems. And membrane was really thought to be a solution to that. So it's not going to last forever. It's 25, 30 years, but you're going to put it on. You're not going to touch it until it's ready to come off and get replaced.
Excellent. I
Really.
really appreciate you sharing that. I love learning new things about, in this case, roofing, which I am not an expert at. Like I said, I try to stay off roofs. I don't want to be up there. So it's great to learn about some of that. But talk to me if you can, and I don't know if you've got one or not, but I always love to ask about memorable projects. Obviously, you've been doing this for a while, Tony. You've got a lot of experience. Do you have any particular projects you've done over the years, any particular roofs or anything like that that were unique and or interesting in any particular way that you might be able to tell us about?
I've done a lot of roofs over the years. Probably the most interesting one, really, which it was just because of the situation. We did a 5-story building. It was a nursing home right during COVID. So
Mhm.
obviously there was all the restrictions, and it was a nursing home. So we had to purchase, we didn't have these. We purchased 2 heavy duty 40-foot ladders, and we trekked this whole thing every time. So climb up to the 3rd story, walk across the roof, and hit another 40-footer to get to the 5th story.
Wow.
And never in my life would I thought we would have been gaining access to a 5-story building by ladder, but we did, and it
Yeah, and I can imagine during
it's a
COVID with the
lot.
nursing home, there was probably no way to go through the building to get up
Well,
at
that was
all,
the
so
thing. When I looked at the job and actually bid the job, we were gonna use the elevators the whole time
yep,
and just go all the way. The one maintenance elevator went all the way up to the roof. You walked out that elevator, went up one flight of stairs, and you were out. Well, then all the COVID stuff happened, and it was a nursing home and masking and various protocols, and it just wasn't viable for us to go through the building anymore. We were gonna have to have regular testing, and we weren't even in our hometown, so we had no way to do that.
sure,
Out of town at that point. So yeah, that was quite an interesting experience, and
I bet.
climbing 80 foot of ladder to get on a building is quite something.
I say probably not a job you wanna have to repeat anytime soon.
Oh,
Uh,
no, the hope was that we never had to use those ladders again when I bought them.
I bet it was. I'm sure your crews would agree with you entirely on that one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. As you look forward into the future, do you anticipate any major changes? What do you see happening with roofing over the next 10 to 15 years? Any crystal ball predictions that you've got for us at all, Tony?
No, I really don't have. Like I say, I'd like to see SBS become a much bigger thing and just entirely
Yeah,
replace oxidized asphalt. But outside of that, especially after the bumps we went through the last few years, any major advancements or changes, everybody's just pulled back on that.
sure.
And went to survival mode as far as a manufacturing standpoint goes. Really, that's going to be the only major evolved evolutionary change, hopefully, anyhow, going forward, is that we just continue to transition away from oxidized asphalt and move over into the polymer modified.
Very
Yeah.
cool. You mentioned a little bit about manufacturing and availability and stuff like that. I know in many industries, things have gotten quite a bit better over the last year as far as availability. How are things looking in the roofing industry? Do I have quite a few choices as a
You do.
property owner, and is availability pretty good on products right now?
Yes. Yeah. Everything really, as of just this past winter, finally caught up and got around, and little bit of time where roofs weren't going on and the manufacturers obviously were able to keep it was starting to come back last summer and then last fall, but it's completely come full circle now as far as the manufacturers that we work with.
Mhm.
Everything is currently available that they are advertising that they're making.
That's good news as a property owner to know that, though, and it means we've got options and we can rely on you to lead us through what we should be looking at and going from there. That's great to know. Last question for you, maintenance wise. We don't think much about roofs as property owners because they're there, they do their job, they're great. Maybe we notice something if there's a limb on the roof of the house that we think we need to get off or something small like that. But other than that, we may not, at least I don't think a whole lot about it as a homeowner. Are there maintenance things that we should be looking at, or are there maintenance things that we should be having a roofing company like you guys come out and look at on a regular basis?
Yeah, there are a few items, not necessarily so much of a regular basis at first.
Okay.
Once your roof hits about the 10-year point, your pipe flashings, they rely on rubber seals that are basically just friction fit to the PVC pipe coming through the roof. Those things dry out and fail long before your roof does. And the big thing we see is those pipes are usually running through a partition in your home, which that would be some
Mhm.
sort of interior wall is what
Yep.
that
Yep.
is. So when they leak, the homeowner doesn't know it. It's running right through the wall all the way down to the crawl space or the basement. So there's water getting in the home that they don't even know about. We'll go out on a roof and take a picture of a vent pipe that has no rubber seal on it at all. Every time it rains or snow melts, it's just pouring in there. And they have
Exactly.
no idea. Oh, no, I didn't know it was leaking. That particular item is a big one that at 10 years, somebody should be getting on your roof and inspecting those regularly if you can't see them from the ground.
Okay.
Another big thing we see is homes with wood siding. You'll have a
Mhm.
chimney trace up there. People will paint the siding on the house. Nobody ever crawls on the roof and redoes the chimney.
Makes
So
sense.
that stuff starts splitting, drying out, cracking, all the corners are opened up. There's no caulk left on it. Your roof really relies on the siding system and the house wrap to be the counter flashing for your flashings. So if that siding system's failing, the roof can no longer really do its job. That's a big one that I think a lot of people miss, that somebody can get up there and establish real quickly. This is going to be a problem and it needs to be addressed.
Excellent. Wonderful advice. I appreciate you sharing how you're doing things and how you got into the industry. And I love hearing your stories, Tony. That's great. If I'm a commercial property owner or a homeowner and I'm up in again, the northern Michigan area where you guys work, what's the best way for them to reach out and get in touch with you and your team?
There's two good ways. Obviously, calling the office is one, and then you can go to preferredroofingservices.com and we have a contact form. You can reach us out that way. Send in a contact. We'll give you a call and set an appointment.
Sounds good. And we'll put all that information right here on the screen so everybody's got that and made available. And let me encourage you, having got to know Preferred Roofing over the last number of months. If you're up in northern Michigan area at all and you're looking for a roof, make sure you include them in your process, because I think you're going to find that you get a very honest opinion of what's happening with a tremendous amount of professional advice. And again, as a property owner, we want to do things that make sense and provide us with good, long-standing value. So I
So
encourage you, reach out, talk to Tony and his team. You won't be upset about it. So, Tony, again, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. I know you've got a lot going on, especially this time of year, and that. So we appreciate you taking time to join us. And just want to thank you again for the great work you do and for taking the time to meet with us today.
absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Home Service Hookup Podcast. And if you have any questions or have a particular industry you'd like us to focus on, let us know. We welcome your introductions and your suggestions as well. And with that, make it a great day.